This is the third central bank in this country. We had the first two. The first one, the charter ran out, and what did Congress do? They didn't want to renew the charter. The second one, Andrew Jackson got rid of it. Now we have the Federal Reserve. And once again, how did the Federal Reserve come into existence? Let's go back in time a little bit. And we all know about the creature from Jekyll Island. We all know that bankers got together. But let's look at the Senate at the time. Let's look at who actually passed it. What group of individuals, what party actually passed this? And this is coming from the Senate.gov. And the headline is, the Senate passes the Federal Reserve Act. And it says, it took many months and nearly straight party line voting. But on December 23, 1913, the Senate passed and President Woodrow Wilson signed the Federal Reserve Act. The need for a central bank became painfully evident during the financial panic of 1907. When the stock market collapsed, banks failed and credit evaporated because the federal government lacks the tools to respond. It had to depend on a private banker such as J.P. Morgan to provide an infusion of capital to sustain the banking system. Now remember, this is what the bankers do. This is what the central bankers do. They create an event to usher in what they want. And that's what they did back in 1907. So let me continue here. To correct the problem of an inelastic currency, Congress created a National Monetary Commission chaired by Rhode Island Republican Senator Nelson Aldrich. Aldrich proposed a system that would be run by private bankers who would act as federal agents. Progressives adamantly opposed what they called a surrender to the money trust and blocked its passage. In 1912, Democrats won the White House and majorities in both houses of Congress. Even before his inauguration, President-elect Woodrow Wilson began encouraging congressional leaders to enact a banking and currency reform. In March 1913, the Democratic Senate created its first Banking and Currency Committee, chaired by the Oklahoma Senator Robert D. Owen. The House Banking Committee was chaired by Virginia Representative and future Senator Carter Glass. In June, President Wilson formally proposed creation of a government-run Federal Reserve System. The House took up the issue and passed a bill in September, after which the Senate Banking Committee began holding hearings. By December, the Senate was debating and voting on its version of the bill. When all the Senate Republicans voted for a substitute measure, Senate Democrats opted to make the banking and currency bill a party question. At the time, the Democratic Conference had a binding caucus rule by which whenever two-thirds of the conference voted in favor of the bill, all of its members agreed to support it and not to offer amendments on the floor. The Senate therefore passed the Federal Reserve Act by an almost party line vote. The bill then went to a conference committee, which forged the necessary compromises and reported it back on December 22nd, when it was accepted by the House. On December 23rd, 1913, the Senate adopted the conference report by a vote of 43 to 25, with every Democrat present voting for the measure and all but catch trains home for the holidays, while the chief sponsors went to the White House. President Wilson signed the Glass-Owens Act at 6 p.m. He used 4 pens, then gave one to each of the leading sponsors. Wilson commented that he was not accustomed to using a series of pens. The Democratic whip, Senator Hamilton Lewis of Illinois, responded, "The bill itself was made in installments, Mr. President." "Yes," said Wilson, and very slowly, the Oval Office filled with cheers for what became the most lasting legislative accomplishments of the Wilson administration. And the Federal Reserve was born. And we can see that, once again, it was the Democrats who were behind all of this at the time. And rules were changed. Of course, rules have changed over time. But we can see that they ushered this in. And here we are today. And they want an unlimited debt ceiling. And I do believe everything is leading up to removing the private West Central Bank, because as soon as the central bank came into existence in 1913, it changed everything in this country. And it allowed blackmail. It allowed corruption. It allowed everything that we're seeing today. And it got a lot worse back in the 70s when we came off the gold standard, where they could just print fiat. Of course, they call it a petrodollar system, but really, is it a petrodollar system? No, it's fractional reserve lending, and all they do is print. It's not really pegged to anything. So I do believe where we're headed with all of this, everything that we're witnessing right now, is to get rid of the private West Central Bank. And the only way to do this is to have them try to move us into their new system and use this crisis to actually usher in a new system that will go against the old system. And at the same time, show the people the truth. Show the people what the Federal Reserve has been up to. Show the people that there's no need for the Federal Reserve. There's no need to have a private Western central bank system. There's no need for this. Remember, these players, the deep state players, the World Economic Forum, the private Western central bank, all these players, they create these events so they can usher in bills. And I think a lot of people now are realizing this, and they're starting to understand it. And it just doesn't have to do with like the false flags, like these mass shootings. You could see it all over the place. They create an event like they're creating right now. They created the event that, oh, look, oil's very expensive. So you go to the pump, it's very expensive to pump your car. What do we need? We need an electric vehicle. Well, who created this? They did. Are they going to create an event for the central bank digital currency? Yes. The head of the Fed already mentioned this. Yes, we can use this to counter certain things because we see certain things happening around the world. I do believe they're going to try to do this. And once again, you can see this is exactly what they do. And I do believe this time around, the Patriots are going to use it against them. And this is going to wake a lot of people up because sometimes you have to show the people the truth. Sometimes you need the people to see it all. And I do believe this is exactly what's going to happen. And I do believe this first salvo of information going at Janet Yellen, going at the Federal Reserve with the 1 trillion platinum coin, I think this is just the beginning. I do believe there's going to be other solutions coming out where, hey, you know something, maybe we don't have to deal with the Federal Reserve. Maybe we can handle this on our own. Maybe we can go back to the gold standard. Maybe we can go back to that and not deal with the Federal Reserve. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot more of this, and I do believe this has just begun. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.